What's up, everybody? Peter X, the So-Coffer, back with a podcast. This is a Level Up, Season 2, Episode 2. Another episode I'm excited to do. Finally doing Prince. Probably the biggest influence on my music is Prince. And so, when he passed in 2016, obviously I took it hard. But my response was to dive in and do a book called The Purple Manifesto, The Leadership Secrets of Prince. So let me say that again, The Purple Manifesto, The Leadership Secrets of Prince. And I have a rough draft of that. And actually, a lot of that is going into the Level Up podcast episodes. I was just looking through it a couple days ago, the draft, and I'm using some of the things in the draft for this. So, talking in episode or the last episode on branding in the 50s and some of the aspects as I, dig deeper. Personal branding is about leadership, and ironically, leadership starts with leading yourself and self-discipline. So, that's what that's about. When I think of Prince, what comes to mind for me, the first thing is what I call the pursuit of excellence, because Prince was good at so many different things when it comes to music. You can argue, this artist or that artist was better than Prince, and this faster, that faster. But, Prince was good. He was the elite in so many areas of music. That's really what makes him unique. He was an excellent musician, with the guitar, with the piano and the keys and the drums and the bass. So, Prince played the drums on a song called Tambourine on Around the World in a Day. So, go listen to that. He's a amazing funk drummer. You can hear that in Tambourine. The ultimate compliment for a drummer, an R&B funk drummer, is what James Brown hired as his own drummer. And I think it's pretty evident, when you hear Tambourine, that Prince is the lead drummer. I think, Dance On from the Love Sexy album, I think Prince plays, some of the drums in that. And from what I could gather, some overdubs from Sheila E. as well. So he's an elite drummer. Also a bass player. Prince is one of the few. His last tour was piano and a microphone, and one of the greatest Prince concerts I ever heard was the very last one he did in Atlanta. And how many folks can walk out by themselves, himself, and sit in the piano and play for hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes and just have the audience riveted. And that's what Prince did. He's such a good singer, and it was he seemed so liberated in that last concert. And this, it's available on YouTube. But he's joking with I've never, seen him so loose and so free. I've probably owned and listened to 150 to 200 Prince concerts, bootlegs and stuff like that. And it's just a wonderful experience. Oftentimes now these concert shows are very, very tightly scripted. Even, going back to the 80s for Prince, because the lighting show was kind of mechanized to the music, and that's one of the reasons Prince decided to do the after shows that were just, jams. And so it was a lot of work, during the tours for Prince to switch up and add songs or do different things, because everything was so synchronized, between the lighting and the music. I think I discussed, my Let's Go Crazy video on Prince. I think he's one of the greatest guitarists of all time. I think, if I remember correctly, when Rolling Stones only done, the 100 greatest guitarists once, and I forget what year that was. It was, 15, 20 years ago, and they rated Prince 27, which, I can't argue with that, because, at the time, they could only go off of the official releases, but now that, there's lots of bootleg live stuff on YouTube, Prince ranks a lot higher than 27. I think he's the most versatile guitarist ever. But now, does that mean best? I don't know. But I think, there are guitarists out there that can, play like Prince, but you need 6 or 7 of them to cover his spectrum. He could do rock and roll. He could do funk, obviously. He was a great rhythm guitar player. Out of the rock genre, he's by far the best. And then, even within the rock genre, you had Malcolm Young of AC/DC, who was really good as a pure rhythm guitarist. And then you had Pete Townsend and of the Who, and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, who were what I call hybrid guitarists, because they were kind of rhythm / lead guitarists. They had a really unique, cool style onto their own. But at some point, I'm gonna do an episode probably on the top 20 guitarists, in my opinion, and everybody has their opinions, but my view of the guitar, has changed drastically since I've started writing music with guitars. You don't really appreciate, good guitar players until you use guitar in a song. And I can say definitively that I did not really have an appreciation for Pete Townsend and Keith Richards until I started writing songs. And it's interesting because you can go on YouTube and they'll have, the 10 most overrated guitar players ever, and Pete Townsend and Keith Richards are usually on that list. And these guys are oftentimes actual guitarists, but I don't know if they're songwriters. It's one thing playing in the cover band or just playing and being, and obviously these guys are really good guitarists, because they'll have other videos where they're teaching, or maybe they'll have footage of them playing. But until you actually sit down and write a song, that's when you really start to gain respect for Pete Townsend and Keith Richards. So, but Prince, he could do so much with the guitar. He always said Santana was his favorite and his true inspiration. But Prince could bounce back between Santana and Jimi Hendrix. Most people thought he was more Jimi Hendrix, and Prince is like, well, yeah, okay, we're both black, but I'm more Santana. And Prince is right on it. He is more Santana, but Prince had elements of Jimi Hendrix, and he could go back and forth. And Prince was such a versatile guitarist. And late in his career, I love his guitar playing, live from, 2005 to, when he's passed, was he really found a middle ground between those two, where, meeting up kind of with, David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, and Eric Clapton, where he really, the mid-tempo songs, he would kill it. The Love We Make, go on YouTube and Google, or just put Prince live, The Love We Make, and listen to some of that. And go to 2009 and hear Prince type into YouTube Prince 2009 Little Red Corvette Montreux. And oh my gosh, his guitar playing in that is beautiful. So Prince really, I mean, he's just, amazing as a musician, and really the only one who can kind of mess with him over, is right now is Paul McCartney. Another amazing underrated uh, musician was Fela Kuti out of Nigeria, Afrobeat. He played he did drums, guitar, but he did brass, so he did the saxophone and he did the trumpet, and nobody, most of the multi instrumentalists play, bass, drums, uh, and guitar, and so Fela brings in the saxophone and the trumpet, and I think that puts him in a different category, so to speak. Also, as a singer, Prince is, I mean, he's Prince. I mean, he's an amazing singer. I mean, you can't argue with that fact. So he's an elite singer. Somebody did a study who has the most range, and Prince ranked second. I don't know, but science was used, and the only one who had a larger range than Prince was Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses. So Prince, when he was an amazing singer that could really, make you feel what he was, singing about in the song. And he was an elite songwriter. Prince, man, was he a good songwriter. I think he's a top, I think he's a top five good, guitarist. I think, singers are, I mean, there's so many good singers out there, but, he's certainly an elite. And, when it comes to great singers, at some point, you're just a great singer, and people can argue back and forth about who's better. But with the songwriters, I mean, oftentimes they write in teams. One-on-one, again, I think Paul McCartney is a great songwriter, but by himself, you listen to Paul's solo stuff. I mean, Paul could just, he could write hooks like nothing, and that's the standard writing, that's the gold standard writing hooks. And when I get into the Beatles, I'll talk about all of the things that the four Beatles brought into it as songwriters. But Prince, Prince can write with anybody, and he did it himself and played everything, more often than not. I mean, not every song. I mean, I think that's a myth, but certainly, probably over his career, at least we don't know too much about the 2000s. You like Prince, go to the Prince podcast, Michael Dean. And Michael Dean is starting to bring in the producers, the later producers. I mean, everybody loves Susan Rogers, who, worked the board, the mixing board for Prince from Purple Rain, I think, to Love Sexy. But so Michael Dean is starting to bring in his podcast, the Prince podcast, folks, other sound engineers later in his career. So it'll be interesting, to see how Prince changed. And, I can, just by listening, I mean, the Symbol album, Prince, I mean, that was him and MPG. I mean, he used live drums. It's interesting. He killed the live drummer, and then, goes to Love Symbol and brings back the live drummer and brings, back live music for that, for the most part with that album. So Prince was always doing his own thing. The thing I love about Prince is, no album he ever made, he has, I think, 38, official, and that's not counting the Black Album, but, for some reason that's not official anymore, which I think I'm going to do an episode on that. But, of the 38 quote-unquote official albums when he was alive, every single one is different, but they're the same. I mean, it's Prince, except maybe for the jazz albums, but Prince really, devoted time into his singing and developed his singing, so you knew that voice the minute you heard it. Prince was also an elite lyricist. When I think of the great lyricist, Bob Dylan comes to mind as the first. You got John Lennon, who was great. You got Jim Morrison, and you have Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. Then you have Prince. To me, those are the top five great lyricists. You can add Nas, definitely, you can add him to that, and I would put Ice Cube in there. He's a great storyteller. He takes the storytelling tradition out of country music and brings it into hip hop. So that's my top seven. Of those seven, you can kind of argue who's, but those are the guys right there. I mean, they know how to write some lyrics, and Prince is in that mix, and in my opinion, those are the best. And also, Prince is an elite performer. He could sing, he can play instruments, he can dance. He knew how to work the crowd, and he had great bands up there with him. And Prince, he only surrounded himself with elite musicians. I mean, the Revolution is a legendary band, an elite band, and it's probably, when it comes to musicianship, and I say this in quotes, the worst band, he had, but, the Revolution, would blow 99% of the other bands off the stage. So, Prince, had elite talent around him. So Prince, you had the whole experience with Prince. I mean, he was, when it came to his dance moves, I mean, who do you got when it comes to best dancers? I mean, start off with Jackie Wilson and James Brown, then you got Michael and Prince, and now you have Chris Brown. Now you can argue, who your favorite style is with them, but those, Prince is in that conversation, and you bring the singing ability, and his ability to play, the instruments, and the great bands that he would bring on the road with him. Nobody has that. And the way to work the crowd, nobody has that package, period. Nobody. James had the great band and the great dance moves. Michael was great, in concert, but Michael had, his band pretty much, stuck to, the records. I mean, Prince was notorious. Prince never played the same version of a song on a tour. So if your favorite Prince song is 1999, he probably, how many tours did Prince do? 20, 30, and he probably did, 15 of those tours he played 1999, and each tour had a different version of 1999. So he never recycled his songs. And finally, I'll get into this later, but, we got Prince at the movies. Purple Rain was a landmark. I must confess I have not watched the Beatles movies, but that's on my list. But, Purple Rain is still, probably the best of the rock and roll films with a rock star in it. As a rock star. I mean, he, that's still, is still the benchmark for those. I mean, it's different from Ray and Johnny Cash's movie and now Elvis's movie, because these are actors playing them, and the Doors movie, all, this is different, and Purple Rain is the benchmark. Now we'll get into the other two movies he released and talk about those later in the episode. So Prince was a great team builder, and I spent a lot of time in the book. Well, I did a whole chapter, the Purple Manifesto, talking about just how good the musicians he surrounded himself with were. I mean, these were all acclaimed musicians who, when they left Prince, many of them went back to the jazz world. Many of them played with other, high level acts. Particularly, I mean, his greatest, creation, and in some ways, at least for the 1999 tour, his Frankenstein was the time. I mean, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis are in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. They were just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as songwriters here in 2022. You have Morris Day, who was had a very good solo career, away from Prince, where, Prince wasn't writing his stuff. I mean, we know Prince wrote all the songs for the time. It was his outlet for his funk side in the early 80s. And we can't, forget about Jesse Johnson's 80s albums. I mean, now he's putting out good music and it's rock, but I mean, Jesse's stuff in the 80s, I mean, was amazing. I mean, Jesse's overlooked. Those albums are overlooked. He claims, he's still a little bitter at Prince because Prince tried to, pour water in his career, and Prince did. I mean, he actually stole used one. I mean, they both had songs called Shockadelica, and Jesse is not happy about that. And Jesse's, has an interesting. I mean, he has an interesting relationship with Prince. I mean, he's a great guitarist. What people don't realize is, Prince played the guitar. If you listen to Get It Up and some of the solos on the First Time album, but he respected Jesse so much, that, Jesse played the lead guitars on the last two. I mean, you can tell the difference in their playing styles for the last two Time albums. And when Morris left the Time, Prince, made Jesse in charge of the Time. Susan Rogers also talks, when she came in, was hired in, for Prince to, be the sound engineer, was Jesse, who kind of showed Susan the ropes about how Prince likes, some of, his music mixed, the basics of it, this is the foundation he likes to start from, and then you can work from there. So they had an interesting relationship. Prince was not happy when he left. I mean, Prince did a song called Old Friends for Sale, based on when Jesse and Morris left. There are many versions out there. He finally released it on the album called The Vault. But, that's a toned down version. I've heard several versions of it, and who knows how many versions of Old Friends for Sale is floating out there. But, I say that because I think that the Time really, hopefully someday we'll get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because they are not, even though they're Prince's proteges, they are bigger than Prince. So, I mean, Prince and branding, excellence, number one. Number two, of course, I mean, come on, The Color Purple. He debuted that on the cover of Controversy, Purple Rain. Now, interestingly, it's rumored that Prince's favorite color was actually orange. So, but Prince was smart enough, married Prince, royalty, purple, and he flew. It flew. It works. I mean, I know when he passed, many cities and buildings celebrated with or marked his passing in remembrance with The Color Purple. The other one of Prince's trademarks and brands, and what the Prince fans call the golden era, was Prince, loved to play in the gray areas and play with contradictions. And of course, the biggest one was sexuality and spirituality. So, controversy, talks about controversy, then does the Lord's Prayer, then has a song on an album called Sexuality, then Do Me Baby. And Prince, that goes back to Dirty Mind, where Prince wasn't even trying to be spiritual in that album. He kind of brings the spirituality in for the first time in controversy. And probably, if I had one album, one Prince album, I could only take one to a desert island, it'd be controversy, because, I bring politics to my album and my work, and that's probably Prince's most political album is Controversy. So yeah, that's, Prince was a master at that. People loved it, when he kind of closed that chapter in many ways with Love Sexy, and for, a lot of the Prince fan base that, Love Sexy is the end of the classic Prince period where, he was dominant and whatnot. And we'll get into that later in the episode. So Prince was famous for the Minneapolis sound. And what exactly was the Minneapolis sound? Well, it was a stripped down sound. Prince basically took the horn sections, from the 70s funk, think Cameo and Earth, Wind and Fire, and even P-Funk, and all those, and basically got rid of the horn sections and used what we call a synthesizer brass patches. And basically they were kind of, the best example I think would be DMSR. Dun, 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 dun. So that patch, that dun, 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 that sound used in that is the classic synth brass, and that became a classic of 80s pop and 80s R&B, and at least the early 80s, the last chapter of funk. And so he got rid of the horn players, and he also got rid of the drummers with the use of the Linn drum, and hip hop picked up on that and ran with it. But R&B has not used real drummers since 82 or 83. Rock acts still use live drums, but and pop is not really is rarely used in live drums, and uses live drums, and when they do use live drums, they're usually in conjunction with drum machines. And at the time, a couple reasons, but at the time, you have to tune the drum pretty much every day, because humidity, drums are actually very sensitive, and time is money back then when it comes to studios. And with the MTV era coming on, these bands wanted to shrink, their numbers for branding. You want, Cameo and Earth, Wind and Fire and P-Funk, they ran 20 strong for sometimes. So, you want people trying to pick out 20 guys to brand off of, or, what happened was, is the songwriters stuck around. And, you make more money, in the band. Even in the 70s, the songwriters were making more money than everybody else in the band. And so usually there's only a few folks in the band writing, doing the songwriting, and they're like, okay, you guys are hired guns. You don't like it, hey. And so, Cameo went down from 12, 15 to 3 in the 80s. And, for a variety of reasons that, everybody did that. And that would have happened anyway, but Prince kind of sculpted the sound, and, he wanted to be different. So that's kind of the Minneapolis sound in a nutshell. brief flashes of the Minneapolis sound, in Dirty Mind, Uptown a little bit, When You're Mine, but really, really, the Minneapolis sound hits in Controversy and in 1999. And, it starts to leave, or, he starts to move on from that song in Purple Rain, where he does, it's still there, with I Would Die for You and Baby I'm a Star and Take Me With You, but certainly by Around the World in a Day and Parade, he's on to different things. But the Minneapolis sound persisted. I've gone back and forth for years about what is Prince's masterpiece, 1999, or Let's Go Crazy or Sign of the Times. And now that they've had the expanded editions and we've really seen what didn't make it on those albums, I have to go. And for me, it was always between 1999 and Purple Rain. And Purple Rain is special because other than Stand by Sly Stone, I mean, it's the masterpiece of blending rock and soul and funk. But 1999 was probably the most influential album of the 80s. That sound, until 86, 87, the DNA of that sound is all over hip hop and pop. And R&B. I mean, it's the show by Dougie Fresh is there, and even in the rock, Pour Some Sugar on Me, Love in the Elevator by Aerosmith. All of that have you can trace the DNA back to 1999. I Love It Loud, Kiss. I mean. Yeah, so that was probably the most influential album of the 80s. And in my opinion, I think, I love the unreleased cuts from 1999 more than anything else. Now, in fairness to Sign of the Times, some of the stuff that ended up in that early 90s Crystal Ball album came out of the Sign of the Times session as well. But to me, just 1999, the influence it had on others, also Prince knew he was about to break out and he was hungry, and that comes across in the album. So Prince, back, in this era of the Minneapolis sound, I mean, he mixed in funk and rock and new wave. The Cars were a big influence. So it's funny to me that, because Prince's fan base is nuts. I mean, they definitely have a crazy wing, and I always laugh at people, who downplay or basically shit all over Prince's 90s output, saying, oh, well, he wasn't, driving, the bus. He wasn't stirring a drink anymore like he did in the 80s. Well, I mean, and they hated it when he introduced rap into, his music. Well, rap became the dominant, genre in Black America, and 88 and on. So, I mean, if Prince just stuck to R&B, he would have, struggled even more commercially. But Prince is the only one, R&B artist who, learned how to be a decent rapper himself, number one. So, and it kills me. It's like, oh, he was, rather than being, setting the trends, he was borrowing from rap and you did. Well, I mean, look, he borrowed heavily from New Wave, in the early 80s, which these folks claim to love, and when he was a genius. When you're, when you're not the dominant genre, you have to, and Prince always borrowed from other genres. So it's just, it's crazy when these folks, you know, dog Prince like that. The other thing, the crazy wing of the Prince fan base doesn't realize is um, Prince would have had a much bigger impact on hip hop if he would have let them sample his music. And Prince was not gonna. He don't want them using bitch hole and all these other derogatory terms. I mean, he spoke to that in P Control, and so rappers in the late 80s and 90s, they weren't. Oh, I like that. Let's figure out how they did that and play it. No, they were let's sample this and rap over it. And so, Prince would have been right there with James Brown and George and P Funk. I mean, if he would have, been open to hip hop folks sampling his stuff, but he wasn't. And so, so yeah, he wasn't the trendsetter in the 80s because he refused for many reasons to let. I mean, Prince, even late in his career was like, hey, I'm still down with live musicians. Clearly just had a problem with sampling. He was like, learn to play some instruments and whatnot, and not, not saying I totally agree, because there's a lot of hip hop that's, from the era is very good based on samples. Now, I'll be honest with you. I mean, if it was cheap, now it's $5, $10, $15,000 to sample a song. If it was cheaper, I would be sampling, stuff, so I think you can do very interesting, very creative work, off the samples. And hopefully at some point, I think, and I'm going to do episodes down the road on the feeding frenzy that's going on right now when it comes to buying up catalogs. At some point, you're going to have to make that money back, and sampling, is going to be one of, not only that, if folks are sampling, this older music is not older music anymore. So I'm looking forward to, them coming up with a model, where folks like me can, get some sampling in. Now, one area where people criticize Prince, the one, and heavily on this, but Prince had this little gangsta chic thing going on for a while. The MPG, a side band, did 3 albums, and the first 2 kind of so. The last one was essentially a Prince, a Prince solo album. But Prince kind of had this what I call gangsta chic. So he had the microphone shaped like a gun. And, this is when gangster rap was big. And so, I mean, yeah, Prince probably, was biting and wasn't exactly, out front with branding, during that little phase that lasted a year or two. But, yeah, I mean, but I still, he kind of took it and made it Prince and still kind of made it cool, in my opinion. In the early 90s, Prince also, this is when he started having the big battle with Warner Brothers. And, the struggle for artists to control their own destiny is part of Prince's brand now. And it goes back to this era. And really, Prince was really, I mean, he was the first to release music on the internet. He did this in the late 90s through the MPG Music Club. So he was well before iTunes and everything else. And a lot of what Prince did, because he was in the wilderness for really from 95, 96 to 2010. So, 15 years. And really, the economic model that everybody's using, including the record companies in some ways, is based on what Prince learned and did. So the folks say, oh, well, Prince wasn't a trailblazer. He didn't do anything after Love Sexy. He did plenty, and his brand is control your music and everything else, and that's why everybody's still fighting for their masters, is because Prince educated artists on that. But he also everything that they're doing today, the economic models, a lot of that is based on what Prince, learned, particularly, post Napster. I mean, Prince figured it out, and, while the record companies and artists were flailing, like, what do we do? What do we do? Wait a minute, Prince is doing this and this and this. So, that's part of Prince's band. So, Ronan Rowe has a book on Prince. I can't think of the name of it right now. It came out in the early 2010s, and it's the only book out there that really looks at Prince from beginning to the early 2010s, and he really talks about the economic model that Prince did, and so, Prince got about 20% of the profits from the albums with Warner Brothers, and he got 80 to 90% when he went on his own. Now, it was tough because, Prince from Raven to the Joy Fantastic to, his return to Warner Brothers, he had different distributors for every album, and that meant some of his albums, went out of print. I mean, most of that stuff was not in print, when he passed. But Prince made a lot more money, even though he sold fewer copies on those albums than he did even on Purple Rain. I mean, Ronan Rowe breaks breaks the numbers down, and even Purple Rain. I mean, he specifically looks at musicology, and Prince really. He made a lot more money on musicology than he did on Purple Rain, and musicology sold a fraction, and had one song, musicology was the only song off that album that even got airplay. So it tells you, how, how Prince just changed the economic model when he was sort of in the wilderness on his own. Another major criticism I got of him was, I gotta be fair here. He's my dude. He's top of my list. But those other two movies, Under the Cherry Moon and Graffiti Bridge, I don't even know if they had scripts. So, I mean, he had a professional screenwriter come in and do Purple Rain. Great cinematography, there was a decent story in there for Under the Cherry Moon, and Graffiti Bridge, bringing in the old Battle of the Bands, but it's almost like they just, what do you want to say in this scene before they shot it? So I gotta, you have to know when to outsource. I mean, part of personal branding is putting your best, product forward, and it's also collaborating and knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and team building, and forming alliances, and knowing who to bring in to put out a good product. And Prince did not do that. He did not measure up to his standard of excellence and everything else with those other two films. So got to point that out. I mean, that Prince's brand to me is excellence, and he did not, he did not meet it in those two movies, unfortunately. Another important aspect of Prince's brand, I touched on this, but I wanted to really focus in on this. People, when they think of Prince's music, as eclectic. I think the a word would be vast. Purple Rain, pop rock, Chaos and Disorder rock, The Truth acoustic guitar. These are all albums. The Truth, a whole album of acoustic guitar. One Night Alone, acoustic piano. Expectation jazz, news jazz. So Prince, did everything and did it well. And he has the most, nobody when it comes to just the level of excellence and the ground cover and the vastness has Prince's catalog, period. The Beatles have a great catalog. Led Zeppelin has a great catalog. Jay-Z has a great. These are people when you talk about large catalogs. To me, these are, Beyonce. I think I consider large catalog 8 albums and beyond. So I don't know if she's at 8, but when she gets to 8, she's gonna be in there with elite. The Rolling Stones, elite. But they don't cover the ground that Prince does in his catalog, and hey. It may not be, if you're not a jazz fan, maybe you don't get into Expectation or News, but it's still good stuff. And The Truth and One Night Alone, it's acquired taste, but the fact that Prince didn't give a damn in the 2000s, that's when he did all this jazz stuff and acoustic stuff. He's like, look, I'm making music for me. I've already done Purple Rain and my masterpiece, The Sign of the Times. I sold all the records and got the acclaim for Purple Rain. So I'm just doing me right now. And, nobody can mess with that catalog when it comes to, the breadth of what he covers. And the final thing I want to cover as far as branding and how, Purple Rain was a smash. It made a lot of money because they didn't spend much money on it. And it was a brilliant concept. But how did that feed into Prince's brand? Prince has always had this mystical and this mystery about him, and certainly Purple Rain fed into that. The main reason why the record companies greenlit the movie and put the money down for it is because it would bring Prince's live show to the masses. The movie was great at that, and people, Prince is, well, you have to remember, it's still early in MTV's, MTV's still kind of a baby in 84, or, when they start conceiving of this in 83. And you remember, they didn't play black videos until Michael Jackson, kicked that door down in 82. And they didn't, and it was only Michael Jackson until Prince, walked through the door too with a 1999 and Little Red Corvette. So it was significant in that because Prince didn't really have, if you go back and look at the 1999 in Controversy, those early videos, it's him on his stage for the most part, the band, but they're not live videos. And Prince did his first live videos, I think, Take Me With You, and I Would Die For You from Purple Rain, I think were actually live in concert. And, other acts were doing more live in concert. But again, why spend the money doing live videos and shooting all that, if you're a record company when MTV's not even going to play it. So that's the first thing that Prince really did well as far as branding out of the movie. Because, the Purple Rain tour was huge. It was the tour of the year and a half when it was out on the road. Everybody was talking about it. So the movie succeeded in that. He also dealt with, he also fed his band. So, the band members got some lines. He let Morris shine. Things were frayed between him and Morris anyway. But Morris probably leaves, earlier. And it was a big boost for Morris's career. He left afterwards, and, you can debate. I think Morris's, the album, the character was an amazing album. And Morris did get some, more bit acting parts. But overall, then, the acting thing didn't really jump off from Morris. But Morris has some very good solo stuff away from Prince that Prince didn't write that was good. And I would strongly recommend checking out the Character album. It's a very good album. And again, when he releases it, the shadow of Prince hangs over it, but it stands on its own. It's a very good album. Shows that Prince could share the spotlight. I mean, Prince over the years has had and he deals with the tensions with his band because Wendy and Lisa wanted him to do one of their songs. It was Purple Rain in that, so Prince deals with some of his I don't know his weaknesses as a leader in that, and he's probably the better for it because, if you flesh it out, in front of the world, then it gets better. He was tough to work for many years as a musician, and I think after the 2000s, he got a lot, he kind of mellowed out a little. And of course, the myth of Prince, one other thing, Prince, we see his sense of humor, comes out in the movie a little. But the myth of Prince, the sexuality dash, spirituality war is very evident in the movie, and it makes the movie, compelling. And Prince's origin story is compelling for the movie. I mean, Prince is always. Prince did not, he hated being typecasted, being straitjacketed, so he was always opaque. If he said, for years it was put out there that his parents were Puerto Rican and Italian. Well, I mean, come on, we know they were black, and he kind of, owns up to that in the movie. So, I mean, but the movie does nothing to, take away the mystique. It just builds Prince's mystique even more so. And so I think the movie is a great vehicle for Prince and his branding. So there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, there's many aspects to the Prince's brand, but I think, what strikes me, I'll say this for the third time, is Prince's pursuit of excellence was that's the one thing I think of in his brand, but constantly evolving is the other main, strain throughout his career, and that's the other thing I think about when it comes to Prince's brand. And obviously, visually, you got to think of the purple. But he did amazing videos. I mean, that's not as big of a thing anymore, but he's probably top 10, all time from that era when it comes to great videos. I mean, he's there with Michael Jackson and ZZ Top. I'm trying to think of, but Prince is right, in that conversation with as one of the greatest artists of the video era as well. But constantly evolving and ever curious, and curiosity, just being curious and trying new things will get you a long way, particularly if you're as talented as Prince is. So, yeah, this went on for a while. I've been waiting to do this, and there's going to be a lot of, other Prince content. I mean, I did Let's Go Crazy, but, I'll be doing classic albums. Prince will be falling into there. I'll probably be doing some more Prince songs as well, when it comes to classic songs. One of the things I do want to look at some point, I'll probably do this in All Things Music, is this whole era from that, this very fascinating era that Prince had coming out of the Parade album. So, there's a couple of projects he has, the Black Album and the original Crystal Ball, not the Crystal Ball he releases in the early 90s, the Camille album, and then so the Black Album was released, then pulled, and then well, that's after Sign of the Times, and then the Love Sexy album is finally released. And so Prince, I think, I have to do some research because there's people that claim, they know the exact track list of all these albums, which, having been in this, I call these kind of pivot albums, and having done a couple of pivot albums myself, I can't even keep track of my own tracks of pivot albums. And we're talking, from the sounds of it, 50 to 60 songs at minimum, where that Prince was sifting through and trying to figure out where they're going. And honestly, it's more than that. Like, I have, different, list of these albums, this album or two that I was trying to figure out. But, there were songs here and there that went in and went out that never got written down that I don't even remember. So, when I get all that music finally out, I want to do a podcast talking about, my decision making on those albums and why things waited and why, things, because, my Cyberfunk 2020 album was, I originally, I did the 317 Volume 1. It was done the week before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hits and we go into quarantine. I'm like, well, what should I do with this? And I was like, well, I waited a couple weeks and I put it out. But Volume 2 at the time was done, and I, then things happened. I realized that, Cyberpunk 2020 needed to be released. So I shelved Volume 2, but I'll just say that the Volume 2 I was going to put out in 2020, and the Volume 2 that's going to come out eventually, two entirely different things. And this is kind of, Prince, this is what Prince was going through, in 87 and 88, and part of 86 Fallen Parade. So it's always interesting when that happens. But, so I'm going to do the forensics, on Prince first, and then try to pick through all that. And then, when the time is right and I've released all the songs from that 2020 period for me, then I will go down, jump in and kind of give you, what I was thinking about when I was doing all that with my stuff as well. So thanks again for listening. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Got 4 albums here on YouTube and on all the streaming services, so definitely check out my music. If you like Prince, he's my main influence. We're different in a lot of ways, but I'm eclectic like Prince is very eclectic. And I also have 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. So you can also look at my other episodes and see there's a lot of interesting stuff going on the channel here with music history, music appreciation, and personal branding. So see you next episode, and thank you again for listening.